بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Most respected ulama ikram, elders and brothers, when a person will study the Quran Sharif, then we will notice that in majority of the paras of the Quran Sharif, there is some mention or the other of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and the nation to which he was sent to, that is the Banu Isra'il. And when a person will study the timeline of the Banu Isra'il very, very closely, in the ayat of the Quran Sharif, and also in the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then we will notice one very, very common principle and one system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses, was that whenever the Banu Isra'il had adhered to the ta'aleem and the teachings of the Torah, and when they abided by the Sunnah of Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and the guidelines of all the other Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam that were sent to them, when they tread this pathway, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had made them conquerors and victors of the different lands and the different cities. And what exclusive ni'mats Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed the Banu Isra'il with, where we hear that their meals were from Jannat at one stage. In one riwayat it is mentioned that even the clothing was given to them from Jannat. There was a period or point in the timeline of the Banu Isra'il when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had actually stopped time in favor of the Banu Isra'il, and only once they had conquered that certain village or that certain city, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had resumed time and allowed the sun to set. And besides this, there were many exclusive ni'mas that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had favored upon the Banu Isra'il, to such an extent that Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam had once asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, "Oh Allah, is my ummah the chosen ummah and the greatest of ummahs? So many bounties and so many exclusive ni'mats upon my ummah. Are they the best of ummahs?" And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, "No, your ummah is not the best." Nevertheless, when they tread this pathway, and they were very, very particular on following the sunnah of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, then we will find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had laid the world at their feet. But no sooner had they begun to now break one law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and one command and one injunction of the Torah was just disregarded. The sunnah of Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam was taken insignificant. The Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam were also just disregarded like that. And they began to flagrantly and blatantly, openly disregard the injunctions of the Torah. They began to look at other nations, those who were the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they wanted to imitate them, they wanted to live like them, they wanted to behave like them, they wanted to dress like them, they wanted to be like them. And naturally, any other way of life, other than the pak, the tayyib, the pure, the divine way of life, slowly, as one command of Allah Ta'ala breaks and Allah Ta'ala phases out, then what it leads to? It leads to a person living, or a nation just thriving over their own desires. And whenever, we will find that whenever the Banu Isra'il had begun to live such lives, where giving in to any and every temptation of this, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had subjected them to such harsh and such difficult conditions, whether it was under the rulership of Fir'aun and his people, whether it was under Bukht Nasr or King Herod that had come later on, and all the other rulers and kings that had come and ruled over the Banu Isra'il very, very oppressively. Our noble Quran Sharif was revealed some several thousand years after the period or the existence of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and the Banu Isra'il in his time. And yet there is so much of mention regarding them in the Quran Sharif, as a lesson for us as a Muslim Ummah, that what condition and what situations they were afflicted with, that what difficulties they were faced with, when they began to stray off the path, and when they began to live a life thriving over their own desires, over their own temptations, giving in to any and every desire of theirs. Those similar conditions will come upon this ummah when we will make the focus of our lives just entertainment and our own just thriving on our own nafs and desires. And the same solutions that had come to them, the crux of all the warnings that have been mentioned in the tafsir of the Quran Sharif, and also in the commentary of the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the crux of which is just to restrain yourself from going towards the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and come back, make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the target, the focus of your life. That same solution will hold true for this ummah. That we need to now kick all other way of life out of our system, out of our lives, and bring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala back into our lives. To center our lives around the desires of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to center deen around our desires. When we look across the world today, the condition of the Muslim Ummah, the suffering of the Muslims, the humiliation and the disgrace that the Muslim Ummah is going through, not only in the land of Aqsa and in the strip of Gaza, but throughout the entire world, whether it is China, whether it is Syria, whether it is our northern African countries, the suffering of the Muslims, the suppression and the banning of one law of Islam in the European and the Western countries, the bills that are being reviewed against Islam in the parliaments currently in certain countries of the world. Every step is going to the direction of trying to wipe out the Muslim Ummah, to banish and to wipe Islam out. Just recently, there was a clip of that one alim that was going around after the holiday or after some weekend, and he took a drive on the beachfront, and he mentions that young Muslim men and Muslim boys and Muslim girls, after Fajr Salah, he sees them on the beach sand walking drunken state, drunk they were, holding hands with that bottle of liquor in their hands, and how they must have spent their night, what is their condition. And on a general basis, as an ummah, who are we trying to imitate? Whether it is our appearance, whether it is our dressing, whether it is our behavior, how we interact with other people, how we treat our wives, our children, how we treat our neighbors, how we interact with our employees under us, those that are working for us, the vulgarity that we sometimes use, the language against them that we sometimes use, our occasions that we host, our nikahs, our walimas, at times, my respected elders and brothers, it makes a person think that the only relationship that this certain occasion has with Islam is the very name of it, that is a nikah and a walima. Otherwise, everything that happens in that occasion is totally against the Sunnah of Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, totally un-Islamic. And besides this, every other event and all the occasions that we have introduced in our pure way of this, in our pure Islamic way of life, such events, such occasions that we have now adopted from such nations that themselves they are at war with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can swear the Zionist leaders how much we want. On one side, we are picking on that person and the leaders of the Western country, etc., what they are doing. That is there in his place. But our actions, our behavior, our way of life shows that we are slaves to the Western world. We are slaves to those Zionist leaders. And they know it also. One of our very senior ulama ikram, he used to always mention that whatever the Western world is vomiting out, we as the Muslim Ummah very quickly we are going and we are licking and lapping it up. Any person that will go to any country, or any student that will go to any university, any institute, we are going to have to follow the bylaws of that municipality or the laws of that institution. If a person is going to just flagrantly and openly violate the commands or the laws of that country, or violate the injunctions of that institute, and he just shows total disregard to the laws of that institute, he will not be given that way that just freely to just continue as he wants. Some action will be taken against him. Wa ardullah. This earth, this universe, this entire world, this is the domain of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah's laws prevail in His domain, in His land. If we are going to openly and flagrantly show disregard to the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and especially after Allah ta'ala sending to us the prize of His creation, the highest and the most beloved of His creation, our Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a guideline to us. And yet, when we look at our own lives, we have literally taken the Sunnah, trampled it and kicked it out of our homes. Why? To adopt the muck and the filth of the behavior and the lifestyle of other nations, who are the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we are living such a lifestyle, then there has to be some repercussion. Some wake-up call will come. In the Quran Sharif, Allah Ta'ala mentions an incident in the timeline of the Banu Isra'il after Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam had passed on. Alam tara ila al-mala'i min Bani Isra'il min ba'di Musa. After Musa alayhi salatu wasalam came Hazrat Yusha bin Nun alayhi salam, and not long thereafter, the Banu Isra'il, they began to violate one command of the Torah, one law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they began to disregard the injunctions of the Torah, the Sunnah of Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. And this is the system of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When any nation, they have a focus, they have a target in front of them, and sacrifice is given to reach that target. Sometimes lives are laid down. More often than not, it is luxuries and desires that are given up for the sake of reaching that target. When any nation tread on this pathway, then this became the beginning of the rise of that nation. And no sooner had the nation now reached the top, or the next generation took over, they did not witness the sacrifice and the difficulties that the previous generation laid down. So everything is there on the plate. Then naturally what happens with all the leisures, with all the pleasures of the world, life becomes boring, and now they seek towards entertainment. And once that entertainment comes into a person's life, then now he is just thriving and living over his own desires, his own temptations. So this, time and again, it happened to the Banu Isra'il. And not long after Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and Yusha bin Nun alayhi salam, this became their condition. They were there at the top. They had everything at their disposal. But now they're looking towards entertainment. And slowly the music crept in. The gambling crept in. Dancing of young girls and womanizing, adultery, etc. Now they began to live a life thriving on their own desires, giving in to any and every temptation of theirs. When this became the general way of life, very similar to what way of life we are living, now and then they would slot in some worship of Allah Ta'ala, some supplication there, some prayer here and there, consoling themselves that we are still on the right path. But on a general basis, the entire way of life was just doing what I want, how I want. The celebration that I'm hosting, I will do it how I want to do it. I will live my life how I want. So when this became the general way of life amongst the Banu Isra'il, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent to them a nation that was known as the Amalika tribe. This tribe had come and they massacred the Banu Isra'il in the thousands. Those that were the rabbis, the very high esteemed in the society, the so-called ulama of their time, who were they were very high status, they were looked up in society. But what they did was, they changed the interpretation of the Torah to suit their own selves. Just for a little of the luxuries and the pleasures and the leisures of this world, they began to now distort deen, and they began to lead the people like that in that way also. They were caught they were the first ones that were caught. They were rounded up by the Amalika tribe. Many of them were slaughtered in front of the entire society, community, and the rest of them were taken as slaves for the Amalika nation. Their valuables, their treasures, their wealth, everything was confiscated from them. Their homes were demolished. Masjid Aqsa was razed to the ground. The tabut that they had, in which were the relics of Hazrat Musa alayhi salam and Harun alayhi salam, and such valuable treasures they had in that tabut, everything was taken away, and they were just left in that, just to wander in that earth, in a land now that has been taken over by the Amalika nation. When this had happened, then amongst the Banu Isra'il, there was a very pious woman, and she was expecting, and not long thereafter, she had given birth to a baby boy. So she had taken this boy, and she placed this boy under the care of a proper, pious, deendar alim from amongst the Banu Isra'il, who were amongst the very, very few people that were still acquainted with the injunctions of the Torah, and he was very, very punctual on the Sunnah of Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. So this boy grew up under the care of this alim, and he grew up to be a very, very intelligent, very, very wise person, very, very knowledgeable when it came to the injunctions of the Torah also, and very, very punctual and pious on the Sunnah of Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. And when he was of age, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed him with the mantle of nubuwwat, and he was known as Hazrat Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam. And this is the incident that the Quran Sharif makes reference to. إِذْ قَالُوا لِنَبِيٍّ لَهُ مُبْعَثْ لَنَا مَلِكًا نُقَاتِلْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. After many, many years, decades of torture, of humiliation under the hands of the Amalika tribe, they come to Hazrat Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam, and they asked him that make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appoint over us a king under whose banner we will go out and we will fight the Amalika tribe. We are ready to fight and go in jihad against these people. So Hazrat Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam, knowing their situation, knowing what types of lives they are leading, he asked them that you are people, you cannot even resist a little of temptation that comes in front of you. You cannot even fulfill the simple commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How are you going to fulfill the command of fighting and jihad? You are asking for something. If that command is revealed, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the command, and then you are not going to fulfill that command, then you are doomed in dunya and in akhirat also. But they were adamant. قَالُوا وَمَا لَنَا أَلَّا نُقَاتِلْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَقَدْ أُخْرِجْنَا مِنْ دِيَارِنَا وَأَبْنَائِنَا. What has happened to our children, our wealth, the humiliation that we are suffering, we are prepared to go out in jihad. So after a while, Hazrat Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam comes back, and he mentions to them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has appointed a young man by the name of Talut. He will be king over you. He is a pious young man, full of wisdom, very, very intelligent, and very, very knowledgeable as far as warfare is concerned. They were very, very disappointed. The Banu Isra'il, there was some bickering and some moaning and groaning. Why? Because Talut was from a different tribe of the Banu Isra'il, from a lower caste, and these people were from a higher caste. But nevertheless, when Talut was now king, and he had prepared an army of 80,000 soldiers from the Banu Isra'il, 80,000 of them. فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوتُ بِالْجُنُودِ. The Quran Sharif mentions, when Talut was just about to depart with his army to go and face the Amalika tribe, then he stops them in their ranks, he lines them up, and he addresses them, and he mentions to them that you people, you are a nation that cannot resist your temptations, that desires of yours, you all are living, thriving on your own nafs, your own desires, you are giving to any and every temptation of yours also. But from beforehand, before we go and we face the Amalika tribe, I am giving you a warning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to test you. Allah ta'ala is going to test you. There is a certain river, there is a certain stream. Do not drink from the stream because it is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, فَمَنْ شَرِبَ مِنْهُ فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. That person that will drink from the stream, he will not be able to withstand anything. He will not be able to fight with us in our army against the Amalika. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَطَعَمْهُ فَإِنَّهُ مِنِّي إِلَّا مَنْ اغْتَرَفَ غُرْفَةً بِيَدِهِ. That person who will not drink, maybe the most is 1 or 2 hand scoops, but that is all. And he resists his temptation to drink further. Such a person, we will gain the divine assistance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So remember, this river is a test. If we want the divine assistance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, resist your temptation from that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning you. That is your test. Nevertheless, they departed from there, and by the time they came to that stream or that river, they were tired, they were weary, they were hot, the weather was hot also. The water was very, very cool and refreshing and inviting. The Quran Sharif mentions, فَشَرِبُوا مِنْهُ. Each and every one of them drank. All of them, that entire army, they drank from that stream, that river. إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِنْهُمْ. Except a small group of people, a small group of soldiers. they resisted that temptation to drink. The command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to resist our temptations. The warning is given also. The focus is on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nevertheless, they had departed from there. In the riwayat it is mentioned, the small group of people were 313 in total. 313 of them, the exact same amount of Sahaba radiallahu anhum that stood with our Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam in the battlefield of Badr. These 313, they resisted the temptation, and now when the entire army departs from that stream and they come to face the Amalika tribe on the battlefield, and now they see the Amalika, they are in their hundreds of thousands. In the hundreds of thousands, well equipped also, and huge like giants they were, their stature, their figures like giants. قَالُوا لَا طَاقَةَ لَنَا الْيَوْمَ بِجَالُوتَ وَجُنُودِهِ. Those 79,600 and some odd who had not been able to resist their temptations, each and every one of them became cowards. Every one of them. How are we going to face such a huge army? Such a well-equipped army? What is going to happen to us? Every one of them fled the battlefield. They were doomed to be cowards in dunya and in akhirat. But those 313 that stood strong, their focus was on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That temptations that they had, they resisted it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What they began to say? They began to chant, Kam min fi'atin qalilatin ghalabat fi'atan kathiratam bi'idhnillah. How many a small group of people there were that overcame and defeated an entire large army, twice the size, thrice their size, and even sometimes 10 times their size. But how did they defeat that army? They had the assistance and the divine protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was with them. Wallahu ma'as sabirin. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions how to get Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on your side also. Allah is with those who have sabr. This quality of sabr brings the divine assistance and the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Today when we talk about sabr, we just refer to it when some calamity strikes, something happened in the family, this person passed away, or some family member is in hospital, something happened in the business, it is going down for some reason, and we'll tell the person, make sabr, make sabr. But the sabr that the Quran Sharif is referring to, and the sabr that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about, is the sabr of the nafs. When that nafs wants to go towards the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that sabr on that nafs. I'm driving that car and a very, very pretty face is walking by. Very, very good figure also, clad in just tight-fitting clothes also. That urge is there to look and to admire. But that sabr of the nafs for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm walking past some shop and that music is playing in that shop. Before I changed my life so many years ago, it was my favorite song. Now I just want to stand there and listen to that song also. But that nafs is talking, that sabr of the nafs. We are driving in the car and someone just cut our lane or they took our parking. It is natural, the nafs will flare. But that sabr on that nafs. This is what Allah subhanahu, in every turn, every facet of our lives, that sabr of the nafs in going towards the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Under the tafsir of this ayat, Mufassirin mentioned that those 79,600 and some odd who had become cowards, their entire lives were led in accordance to how they wanted to, giving in to any and every temptation of theirs. Yes, they would slot in some prayer here and some supplication there, just to console themselves that we are still on the right track, or we are still the Muslims of that time. But it was how I want and how we want to do it. The occasions, our ceremonies, our marriages, etc., is how I want to do it. Not how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. And how they ended up, the result was they were doomed in dunya and akhirat. But those 313 whose focus and yaqeen was on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Mufassirin mentioned, they lived their lives restraining themselves from the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whenever that it is natural, a person is created naturally that the nafs wants to go to haram. But that restraint is there. These 313, they lived their lives centered around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not around themselves. And that is why they gain their success. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those that will make that jihad. What jihad he will make? That tug of war with that nafs. It constantly wants to go to haram, but he is constantly in that jihad against it. That tug of war, it wants to go, he is holding that reins. It wants to go there, he is holding it. He wants to look, but he is suppressing it. He wants to utter, he wants to sway his stuff, but he is making sabr for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. He will find the protection and the divine assistance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with him. This is what we as an ummah need to come upon. To center our lives around the desires of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, in the manner, in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do it. Not how we want to do it. Oh, when and how it suits us, fine. We need to come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bring Allah ta'ala back into our lives. And from now, we need to start training ourselves in restraining our nafs. Restraining that desires to go towards our temptations. We can see what is not happening across the world. The agents of shaitan. And what preparations they are making for the greatest fitna that has been mentioned time and again by most of the Anbiya, if not all of them. And that is the coming of Dajjal. If we cannot even resist little bit temptation, shaitan will just dangle a little of the glitter and the glamour in front of us, and already we are swept away. It's an old trick. The trick of shaitan is the same. It is just maybe the items or certain methods are different. He tricked our father, Hazrat Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, Hawa alayhi salam. He had dangled the apple with the promise of the dunya. That same way, the same trick has been going from generation to generation. Today it is the cell phone, it is the internet, it is the screens that we are involved in, the sins, the music, the clubs, etc. That is becoming, as the decades are going, these sins are just becoming more and more easier for us to access. So all the preparation is being made for the arrival of Dajjal. What is going to happen? Today the tests are so much. When our children are our age or when they are grown up, will they be able to resist the test of their time? From now we have to train ourselves, train our children also in resisting our temptations into going towards the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We make dua to Allah ta'ala. Allah ta'ala make us true, proper slaves of His. True ummatis of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remove the sufferings and the difficulties of the ummah across the world. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.